Consider this little graph, a scale from all talent to all work. Where is computing? Success in computing is all work or all talent. If I were to ask you to put a tick on this scale, where would you put it? I've asked this to hundreds of people and seen many different answers here. And I'm not actually going to get too much into the right answer. There are brilliant people that are extremists on both sides. I've heard people say that after years of study, they're unable to determine that such a thing as talent even exists, putting them pretty squarely in the all-work camp. I've also heard people say that they believe that less than 2% of all people could ever, no matter how hard they try, write a good algorithm, putting them pretty solidly in the all-talent space. The truth is almost certainly somewhere in between. However, although measuring the truth is not easy, we can measure something about people based on what they put on this scale. If they tend to put their marks down here in the all-talent space, okay, we call this a fixed mindset. If they put their ticks down here in the all-work area, we call this a growth mindset. And there have been many researchers that have talked about this. You can tell based on the terminology they picked for the two extremes which one they like. Right? A fixed versus a growth is very clear which one has the better emotive space. But there's some reason for this. There's lots of things that are associated with this mindset. Right? People with a fixed mindset are more likely to quit if it's hard. They're more likely to cheat because the result is seen as more important than the process. Right? And there's a variety of other aspects of fixed mindset that are associated with things that we're not particularly positive about as educators. One of the ones that we want to talk about in particular, though, is how these people over here with a fixed mindset tend to have stereotype threat be quite strong in studies. And over here, stereotype threat tends to be quite weak. And this, to some degree, makes some sense, but we'll talk some about it after we look at some of the studies. So this is one example of a study from 2003 that investigates this in a fairly controlled environment and also tries to compare it with some other forces. So we have four groups here. What these groups are given, they were all given some sort of training. They were all given the same amount of training, so the time spent with extra training was irrelevant to the effect. And the control group here was given this anti-drug, just some miscellaneous training that wasn't related to the task at hand. The other groups were given some version of extra training. So the incremental group were trained in the growth mindset. They were given instruction about how the brain is like a muscle. The more you work it, the more it grows. You all start not knowing, you develop understanding over time. The attribution group were told essentially that everyone struggles. Similar to the normalize the struggle video in this module, right? They were told to attribute their difficulties not to the stereotypical aspect of their character, but instead to the fact that it was hard and that everybody struggles. And then the combined is both of the incremental and the attribution message. The interesting thing here to note is that in this particular case, they were given a math test, which has a strong stereotypical impact of gender at the time this test was given. And we can see there's quite a large gap between male and female performance on general in this test. We can see that was because of the stereotype, because either of these sort of stereotype blocking efforts had a reduction where the males and females performed similarly. And in particular, when we gave them both of the tactics, we actually see a slight inversion of male and female performance. Not statistically significant, but a little bit. All of these are not statistically significant, right? So having people understand a growth mindset, understand that the struggle is normal or both, can impact and reduce the impact of stereotype threat on the students. So let's talk just a little bit about why this works and how this works and why you ought to do it. Let's start with how you do it. There's lots of aspects of inculcating a growth mindset. One of the biggest ones is believe it yourself. What you believe about the world will tend to rub off on your students, and what you believe about your students will tend to rub off on them. If you believe that if they work hard they can become smart, they will tend to believe that as well. Now, some of you don't believe that, right? Some of you are over at the talent end of the spectrum. But let me just sort of make a little pitch as to why you ought to still act like you believe it, even in that case. Let's suppose you believe, I don't know, it's 80% talent, 20% work. Well, your job as a teacher is precisely that gap. Your job is the amount of it that is left to work, the difference between the truth and talent. Right? I like to sometimes think about personal trainers. A personal trainer's job is not to find the most genetically perfect specimen of humankind. It's to take whoever comes in and train them to be as fit and healthy and strong as they can be. Your job is to be a cognitive personal trainer, to take everybody where they come to you and build up whatever portion is available to talent so that they can be as smart and effective in their field as possible, right? So you need to act and focus on the work in your own thought, in your own way of dealing with your students. A big way this shows up in practice is in praise. Okay? Roughly speaking, we can break praise into the is praise and the did praise. The is praise says something like, you are so smart, that you are clever, you are great. The is and the are, right? The did praise something like, you worked really hard and it paid off. You've shown a great deal of diligence, right? When you use did praise, the emphasis on the work, and it tends to inculcate this growth mindset. The is praise tends to inculcate this fixed mindset. You are smart or you aren't. A mindset that we don't really want our students to have. You can also just state that there is growth. And this can actually be a useful way of normalizing the struggle as well, one of the other tactics we talked about, right? One of the ways of telling people everybody struggles is say everybody struggles at first. But as they work, their mind gets better at the task at hand, automates these processes, and they become smart at this. So, various ways that you can emphasize this notion. As to some sort of general gut instinct of why this has a significant impact on stereotype threat. Right? When you're over here about the work, you tend to believe the stereotype is about those who don't try. Right? If I believe it's all about how hard you work, and the stereotype says people like me don't succeed, that just is a message about how hard they tried. I try, and it doesn't apply to me, right? It's about their actions rather than their being. If I believe in the talent, then it's about me, right? If nobody like me is talented in this field, then I'm also not talented in this field. And it creates a great deal more stress. If I am good, it's because I'm even more weird than normal, and it heightens all those stereotypical forces. So we really do want stereotype threats to be reduced as much as possible. Your job is to focus entirely on the portion of their work that is about the growth mindset. And no matter how much talent actually exists, it's not your job, and it's not worth mentioning to your students in any way, because the growth mindset will give them the good study habits and reduce the impact of stereotype threat.